This is the Planning and Zoning Commission for the Municipality of Anchorage, the December 10th, 2012 meeting. May I have the roll call, please, from the Secretary?
Connie Yoshimura.
Here.
Bruce Phelps.
Here.
Stacy Dean.
Here.
Harry Parks. Dana Cruz.
Here.
Peter Mulcahy.
Yes, ma'am.
James Ferguson.
Here.
Tyler Robinson.
Here.
All right, thank you very much. We have the minutes of the meetings for September 10th, 17th, October 8th, and December 3rd. May I have a motion for approval, please? It's been moved by Ms. Dean and seconded by Commissioner Ferguson. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? Is there any objection to the minutes? Seeing and hearing none, those minutes are approved. Under a special order of business for disclosures, Ms. Dean, may I have you ask for disclosures?
Commissioner Phelps, do you have any disclosures?
No.
Dana Cruz, do you have any disclosures?
Nope. None, ma'am.
Ms. Yoshimura, do you have any disclosures?
I do have a disclosure. In the case of Case 2012-141, the master plan review of a public parks master plan. I would like to disclose that I have in the past worked as a real estate broker for the Great Land Trust, but I have no financial interest and did not participate in any way for the case in front of us tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Ferguson?
No, ma'am.
And Mr. Robinson?
I would like to disclose in the matter of 2012-141. I know the petitioner is Parks and Rec, but given the nature and participation of the Great Land Trust, I'd like to mention that I have donated a small amount of money in the past to the Great Land Trust, not specific to this project, and don't think that that precludes me from being objective in the case of the master plan. But
Madam Chair, do you feel that's warrants a vote or questions?
Not at this time.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I do have one other matter under special orders of business. I would like to propose an ordinance thanking Bruce Phelps for his many years of service on the Platting Board, Planning and Zoning Commission, and the Library Board.
All right, thank you very much, and particularly recognizing all the work that he has done in the past couple of years on the Title 21 rewrite as well. So, Ms. McConnell, we've had some correspondence about that potential ordinance for the Assembly, so we look forward to being able to fulfill that ordinance, and we thank you for your service. And I'm certain that there are other commissioners who would also like to make a comment or two. Commissioner Ferguson?
I'd just like to say I worked with Bruce on Title 21, and I worked with Bruce here, being that he's from the planning side of the family and I'm from the development side of the family. You would think it would be not always in agreement, but Bruce has done yeoman's duty. He's been able to explain to it, and I've learned a heck of a lot of them. And Bruce, thank you very much for your help.
Thank you. Commissioner Mulcahy?
Yes, ma'am. I just want to echo what Jim has said. It's been an honor to work with you, Bruce. Impressive, and you took this guy here and helped me learn how this commission works, and your contribution. I tell you, Title 21 would not be at the Assembly today if it wasn't for your efforts, and that's just one example of everything. So I just hope that when this ordinance passed, that Bruce Phelps Day is a day off work.
All right. Thank you very much. Commissioner Bruce, did you?
Yes, I'd like to just make a couple quick comments. You know, when I got on this commission about a year and a half ago, and I sat at the first couple of meetings, I was paying particular attention to when Bruce was talking, and after my first meeting or two, I immediately ran to the airport looking for Rosetta Stone language so I could understand what the hell he was saying, because I had no clue. Well, after a year and a half, and listened diligently, and thanks to Bruce, my my knowledge has increased, probably not as much as it should have, but I appreciate that, Bruce. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Let's stand and...
Can I make a comment here? I'd just like to say I really have enjoyed working with the Commission. I frankly was skeptical about Title 21. I thought that was difficult to do and a really big bite. And frankly, given my experience, I didn't think it was possible. But I'm really glad we did it. And I'm really proud of the Commission members spending the time on this. And I think that there's different perspectives on what we did. But I know that each of you worked really diligently, and you did out of what you thought was correct.
All right, thank you very much. Shall we stand, please? Now, I'm sure we're going to disagree with you on a few things this evening, but that's the way this commission works. So, all right. Moving on to the consent agenda item, we have resolutions for approval on Resolution 2012-057, Resolution 2012-058, and on other items, we have Case 2012-145, an annual review for Carlick Manor. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
I really can't participate on 1A or 1B because it was not present at some of those discussions where the decision was made.
All right. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Phelps? Just to point out that those resolutions are plans, and you do not have to have been present at all the meetings to be able to vote on those, because we're recommending to the Assembly.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. We have a motion to approve the consent agenda by Commissioner Ferguson. Is there a second? It's been seconded by Stacy Dean. Is there any objection to the consent agenda? I've already asked that. Seeing and hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. Thank you very much. Moving on to unfinished business and actions of public hearings, Case 2012-104, the Municipality of Anchorage, element of the Comprehensive Plan for a Chugach Access Plan. The public hearing is closed. This deliberation has been postponed from October 8th, November 19th, and last week's meeting as well. What is the wish of the Commission at this time? Commissioner Phelps.
I would move for approval.
Do I have a second? It's been moved and seconded by Commissioner Phelps and Robinson for approval. Would you like to talk to your motion?
Yes, I would.
All right.
Yeah. I think that this plan is a very good plan. It's spent a lot of time in development, and I must admit that there are times where I didn't think the plan was sufficiently well developed to actually be sure that we could implement it properly. But one of the things I did last week was go with the plan, go with the changes to make sure that what I thought were the required changes were in fact there. One of the changes was to eliminate the objective which said every quarter of a mile you need to have some sort of access facility. So that's been eliminated. The other change that's been made has been actually a number of them, but right now the way it's written is that you specifically reference 2108-040, and the way it's written is that is the authority, and that is the only authority that can be utilized. Furthermore, it also specifies that this authority can only be used relative to this plan. So you can't use this plan for any other actions than the ones that are specified in the plan itself. The other aspect is that the sites that we're talking about that are unsecured sites, and these are sites that can be, but not necessarily are, on private property, are not a huge number. So I worked with staff to identify the number. The number is approximately 15. Actually, when development would actually occur, it would be less than the 15, but that's the maximum number. So you have a maximum number identified now, so you can't use the plan as a basis for the approval of anything more than that number, and you can only use it at the locations that are actually specified in the plan itself. The other important change I think that's made, and actually this is reflected in the work that staff did, is it gave a description of the development review process and how this particular plan and this accompanying ordinance would work. And I guess I should mention, too, that the implementing ordinance is not final yet. It's still going through the review process, but it does reference the Chukach Access Plan. One of the things that I wanted to mention is that we had, when we reviewed the Chukach Access Plan, recommended may require the dedication. That was taken up by the Assembly and is now will require the dedication. So we had argued for some discretion. The Assembly disagreed with us, the subcommittee, and we basically are in a situation where it says shall require. So if it says shall require, it needs then, we need to be sure that the plan is very specific in what it will require and the processes of that requirement. So one of the things that this change is done, and you see it more specifically on page, actually it's 2, of the December 10th memo in item 6, it actually describes how the dedication process would actually work. And the dedication process is one that is typical in a subdivision process. This is not unusual. What this basically says is that when there's the requirement for access and where the access is identified in this plan, that the planning board can utilize this plan for making the determination that, in fact, that access, it's called an unsecured site, will be provided. Now, the authority is only in terms of dedication. It's not in terms of construction. The way that this is worded now is that the construction would only be required if, in fact, the road, for example, was required as part of the subdivision itself. If it's not part of the subdivision, then it's a responsibility either of the municipality or the state, depending upon location, to actually fund that. So now we have clarity that, in fact, for these private unsecured sites, that the way it's going to be typically utilized would be in terms of a dedication. And dedications are not unusual. In a planning action, you dedicate pedestrian easements, telecom easements, any number of easements all the time. So we're not talking about an unusual action here. We're talking about a typical and frequent action, as a matter of fact. So I think that these changes, and there's others as well, too, that have been developed, make the plan much more specific, and the recommendations are much finer, and we have a much better control, I think, over the plan recommendations itself. A couple other changes that were mentioned is that there was concern that Commissioner Dean had about the maps. They are going to revise the map to make them more specific and deal with some of those concerns. And also we have clarified that these unsecured sites are not just on municipal land. They said private land and municipal land, but I found out is that it also occurs on state and federal land. And so we changed that requirement as well to say municipal, state, federal, and private land. So frankly, we want to have a fair playing board, and that's what we did. We made those changes to actually secure that. So I think, Madam Chairman, that for those reasons, and because I actually go back a step out. The other reason I feel strongly about this is because I was on the planning board for 4 years, and we had at least 2 cases come up where this was a huge issue. We had 50 people at the public hearing, and we realized at that time that we needed to have access. The attorney told us, this is the municipal attorney, said that we didn't have the authority to require access. We disagreed with the municipal attorney, and frankly, we lost the battle. And he said, if you're going to require access of this type, it has to be in an adopted plan, and it has to be an element of the comprehensive plan, and you've got to have the authority in the AMC. And so one of the things we tried to do in this whole process is develop this plan, have it adopted as an element of the comprehensive plan, and being very specific in the authorities for the AMC. So now we actually have the mechanism by which we can cause the dedication to occur, whereas in the past we did not have that authority. And so this is a really necessary authority for the planning authority to utilize, and it will eliminate a lot of these fights that we've had in the past about can we even do this. So those are for a variety of reasons that it would have, both in terms of the changes to plan, but also in terms of how it works in practice. For those reasons, I would support it.
Thank you very much. I have Commissioner Ferguson in the queue.
Bruce, I sincerely appreciate your efforts. I pushed my button.
Okay.
I really appreciate your efforts on this, but I have not had the time I believe I need to review your comments and look what we've got. We've got the issues on the map. I will not be supporting your motion. I would prefer that this come back to us after we've had some time to review this information.
Bruce, I have a question to ask you along the same lines of Commissioner Ferguson. Is there anyone here who can give me any assurance that the 15 private property owners are aware of this plan and that they indeed have been individually contacted?
Madam Chair, Thede Tobish with planning staff. We do have a list here. I'm not aware that the state notified them individually. Some of them participated in the state process, and some of them have worked with staff over the years for similar reasons, but I don't think they've all been individually notified.
I consider this plan and these easements or rights of way almost like a taking. And, you know, we notify property owners in a rezone within a certain distance. And I am just very uncomfortable approving this plan. I agree with Bruce theoretically that in order that there needs to be access, and that access needs to be identified to assist in the platting board. But I think it is extremely important that the private property owners that this plan is going to impact significantly have an opportunity to be notified and to be personally contacted by the state. Yes.
Yeah, Madam Chair, after hearing the Commission speak to this issue, in your packet tonight on Exhibit F, we have added a provision trying to respond to that about notification.
Yes, and I appreciate that, but that is at the time of the public hearing before the Assembly and not before the Planning and Zoning Commission, as I understand it.
Through the Chair, this evening you should have, what's it called here? Supplemental information laid on the table. It's called, the front page says E1, but it's entitled Exhibit F.
Are there other comments from the Commission? Commissioners? Commissioner Robinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm interested in hearing where others are on this, and I'm prepared to support this plan, whether that's here tonight or at a later date. I certainly commend Mr. Phelps and the work that he's done to go through this document. I think given his history at the Platting Board, his knowledge of state parks and here at Planning and Zoning Commission, in addition to the reasons that he identified, I think it's a real opportunity for us to be proactive in planning in Anchorage. We continue to grow as a community. We continue to have needs to access this immense resource, and I think it's important that we continue to find ways to access it at more than just a couple of main points, main access points. And I think as I reflect back to the public hearing, we heard from, a woman who had homesteaded, in the Eagle River area and had worked hard to make sure that a portion of her homestead was set aside for public access. We heard from people that had worked hard to relocate trails on their own property to invite access into the park. I think that's great, but I don't think I'm not willing to rely on the sort of good-hearted nature of a few people to make sure that access happens. And I think we need a proactive planning tool that lets people know where the state is likely to have access needs and desires, and a clear process on how to make that move forward. So Again, I think the work that is done certainly helps clarify a lot of the questions that I had in the document. I certainly understand that there may still be some issues outstanding, and I, for one, am willing to work with this body to make sure we have a good document moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Mulcahy.
First, I'd like to acknowledge the efforts of Commissioner Phelps on this one as well. And if I can, Bruce, Exhibit F, that captures the email you sent out over the weekend that we had a chance to. This is, I haven't gone word for word, but it looked very similar to what you sent out, so this is.
Yeah, actually what happened is that I was working with staff on Friday morning, and work was just too busy. I couldn't get to it until Saturday, and so I sent it out on Saturday because I was concerned that you guys were not going to get it until Monday, and that's too late. And so what was sent out was basically my document with a couple of recommendations from staff. So I kind of want to point that out, is that it wasn't necessarily just a staff recommendation. It was actually my recommendations that staff actually took and then put in the right format.
Well, this is another case where there was a plan that I was not necessarily prepared to support, but due to your efforts in the last minute, I think you helped with Government Hill and the Historic District plans and moved them to a state where we were able to approve those. This moves it very closely, so overall I see the need for this plan. I think it's in good shape. However, if it sounds like there may be some reasons where we can, a postponement might make it just a little bit better, but thanks to your efforts,
yes.
I'm pretty well on board with this plan.
All right, thank you. Ms. Dean.
Commissioner Phelps, I really do appreciate your support and help on this. It's been very time-consuming, I'm sure, to put this all together. But Chair Yoshimura, I was wondering, I'm torn between delaying the vote and postponing, or taking a chance on the plan not passing because it doesn't have enough favor. So I'm not sure which direction we should go.
Let's see. Madam Secretary, could you tell me, given the current status of the commission, the members that are absent, the members that have resigned, what is the vote requirement for passage?
It takes 5 votes.
5 votes. Commissioner Ferguson.
Madam Chair, I'd be prepared to make a motion, if this motion fails, to have this come back before the body once they can assure us the notification has been made and if the maps get legible. I support this. I support the principle of this, but I believe that in spite of everybody's best efforts, we're all volunteers. We need some time to review the material we have. We have raised issues with these maps before. Staff has recognized the issues with the maps, and we have the issue with notification. I think we need to get those answered before it goes forward. But if this motion failed, I'd be prepared to make a motion to bring it back.
I think what would be appropriate would be to withdraw the motion and have a motion for postponement. If the motion for approval fails, then we are finished. Yes, please, assist us.
Couple things. Just to point out, clarify, with the motion that was on the floor, Mr. Phelps had a lot of findings. So if you withdraw that motion and all the background with that motion, you're going to lose those findings. Mm-hmm. So I would recommend keeping the motion at this point on the table, and possibly, if you don't have 5 votes, do a postponement. But do keep in mind that when you postpone it for that notification to pending notification of those individual property owners, that the public hearing is closed.
This would be a...
One last thing, I'm sorry. If this motion fails, it fails. That's it.
Yeah, we don't get to see it again if it fails. So I think a motion.
Chairman?
Yes.
Can we adjourn to what's the
You want to take a break?
committee of the whole.
Committee of the whole.
Oh, you want
That's
a committee of the whole? All right.
We
Yes.
can do that, can't we? So we
Yes.
can discuss something.
Yes, we can. I need a motion for it to go into the committee of the whole. Moved by Ms. Dean. I need a second by Commissioner Ferguson. We have no objection to the committee of the whole. We are in the committee of the whole. We can speak as we wish.
Good. It's nice to have that flexibility at times, isn't it? It is, I understand where you guys are coming from as well, too. I guess my position on this is that it's well developed. I think the controls are in there. I mean, I'm convinced at this point that I think that it's sufficiently far along that we're not going to hurt ourselves by adopting this. One way of approaching it would be to give conceptual approval, not final, but conceptual approval with the idea that staff is going to evaluate X, Y, and Z, whatever they are, and bring it back. I guess you could still finally determine to not approve it, but, you know, what I'm kind of hearing on the table here is that the idea of a plan of this type does make sense. And so, you know, I think I just would hate to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I'm not going to be able to argue this. I mean, if I was going to be here 2 weeks from now, I probably would have a different point of view. But anyway.
Well, I guess let me respond a little bit, and there are other people in the queue, which is, you know, I think we're all supportive of a plan. And we are all supportive of the need for a plan. But we have asked repeatedly for additional information. And now, you know, it's taken us several weeks to find out that there are approximately 15 private property owners, and we still don't know how many of them have actually been notified of what I would consider this taking. And we also have fuzzy maps. So we're not saying that for me personally, as a commissioner, I'm not saying I don't want this plan. I'm close, but I have to have some more information. I have to have some assurances that there's been proper notification, and it's not like a rezone where everyone in the immediate area has to have been notified. That's not the situation that we're dealing with. And in all honesty, I doubt that all of the, I have to have more information before I proceed. And I would like nothing better, Bruce, as to have this be your last hurrah and this passes with your good blessings, because you've done so much work for the commission. But I am concerned about the private property owners that this plan is going to affect. Commissioner Robinson and then Commissioner Ferguson.
Thank you. I guess my first point is, given what the Secretary said about the public hearing being closed and the desire to notify property owners, what do we intend to do? Ask them to provide feedback in writing? I mean, in a sense, you're just alerting them to something that they'd have the opportunity to do in front of the assembly, you know, anyway. So I just want to be clear on what it is that we're asking of them. I guess the second point is with respect to a taking, and I do understand, Madam Chair, where your comment is coming from, but it's an awfully strong word, and I think that in fact this plan is trying to avoid the claims of a taking by creating certainty in process, and I think you have to look at the state parks as asking for access, much like you would any other property owner asking for access via other owners. And so I just think that we need to be careful going down that road. I understand we don't want to take somebody's land and construct the next Glen Alps, but in a sense what we're trying to do is avoid the Glen Alps by distributing that use all along the frontage of the Front Range here. And I think I simply think that if there's a way that's done openly, and we put the state on notice that they are going to have to come up with resources to develop a lot of the facilities, because the vast majority of them are on public property, then I think we're going down the right path to actually avoid conflict rather than create it.
Thank you. Commissioner Ferguson.
While you might have a point on a taking, it's definitely an encumbrance on a piece of property. And I believe it's critical that we have notice on that. And if nothing else, we at least could assure ourselves that the people involved are notified prior to it coming before the assembly. And I recognize our public hearing is now closed. I also recognize that maybe we shouldn't have closed it without making sure those people were noticed. We've gone down this path. We've got to make sure that they have the opportunity, that they are notified what's going on before it goes to the assembly. And the only way we can do that is to, raise a flag now. In a perfect world, I'd like to see some way to keep Bruce's comments and Bruce's findings intact. Because Bruce, if your efforts weren't there, I would not be supporting this plan, period. And so you've provided the ladder to almost get me there, but at the same time, there's 15 people out there that we need to have a reach out to them so they at least are informed before it gets to the assembly. So it's not sitting here with the assembly members with the same argument. Part of our job is to act as a filter to clean up as much as we can, or enhance or correct, or not correct, but enhance what goes to the assembly. So I need some help to figure out, and unfortunately we're a short board tonight, so every vote is critical.
Yeah.
And so there's a couple things working against us, and I'd like to have input on how best to proceed.
Bruce, you're in the queue. Do you have something? Okay.
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, the plan's been revised to require facilities on state park, not on private land. So just be clear about that. That was another change that was made as well, too, that I didn't mention. Keep going back to that. This plan is a mechanism. What pulls the trigger, so to speak, is a normal platting action, where you have a subdivision that comes before the platting board, and you look at the various plans. You're going to have a trails plan, you're going to have a wetlands plan, you're going to have this plan, that other plan, what have you. This is just one more of the things that staff is going to have to look at in terms of making a determination. The other thing that we changed in this is that we also included language that spoke to feasibility. And now we have language in there that wasn't there before that basically says that before you make a decision on, it's called an unsecured site, that you're going to have to go through an evaluation of topography and soils and what have you, and you can make the determination that it's not feasible, that it does not make sense at that location. The way I think that you might be able to deal with this, it's really unfortunate it's a short board. I mean, it kind of puts us in a very difficult position, but one of the ways of dealing with it is to first recognize that there will be the requirement for noticing at the time of the subdivision plat. Okay. If you want to put a requirement that specifies that before the plan can go to the assembly, that all the property owners will be contacted, and that that information will be made available to the assembly at the time of approval, of review, and that would be one way of dealing with the issue. So if the issue is proper notification to the public such that they have the opportunity of, commenting on it, I guess that would be one of the ways of actually dealing with it.
I appreciate what you had to say, Bruce, and I respect your opinion a lot, but what I can tell you is that feasibility that you're discussing is going to fall on the shoulders of the private property owners, and it's going to be at their expense. Because once that has been identified as an access point, as a private developer, I can tell you it will be just like a wetland. You will have to go to a lot of time and expense to prove the lack of feasibility. So it's a burden. It may or may not be a taking or whatever, but it is still a burden that the private property owner is going to have to prove as it relates to feasibility. Commissioner Mulcahy.
Yeah, as I understand it, there's basically the two issues. One is the notification, the other is the quality of the maps. And Bruce, I was just about to ask that question, and you just made the comment that possibly approve it with the condition that before it goes to the assembly, that when it goes to the assembly, it is demonstrated that the private property, those 15, right, maximum 15 are notified. I'd be comfortable with that, as I think as Commissioner Robinson alluded. I don't know what else we do with that information other than, so I don't know that that would change us much other than that knowing it. So I guess the next question then would be, what if we want better maps, what is the timeline, and have we heard from staff on what it takes? Is that, are we allowed to ask questions outside the committee of the whole?
Absolutely. Yes, we may.
If need any
Staff is
thoughts
here for our reference.
on maps being a better resolution maps? I've seen some of the traffic, but I'll be honest, I don't recall.
Through the chair, Mr. Mulcahy, the maps, if you're in Exhibit F, we clarify that, how they will change. Looking here, it's item 11 on page 4. The idea will be that the final plan will have the new maps, reflecting your findings and anything that might come from the assembly as well.
So that you're saying that the maps would come out after assembly approval, so you wouldn't be presenting improved maps to the assembly?
Pardon me? Could you repeat that?
So if I read 11, or if I understood what you said, so you're saying that the improved maps would come after assembly approval? You would not be providing improved maps to the assembly?
Well, we could go either way. It's typical that we do final maps after the assembly approval.
I think I'd be more comfortable the other way around.
Yeah. Can I say something? This is actually state mapping, not municipal mapping. So we have control over the process, actually. And what I can assure you is that we will add those aspects on those maps that are concerned to the Commission. I've heard streets, other features so the public can actually understand where it is. And what you could do is specify in whoever's concerned about this, what you want on the map, and then we'll then put it on the map.
And Bruce, I just don't understand why we couldn't have had this information with these 15 private property owners and the specific information on the map at the time that this plan was submitted. If it's that important to everyone, then we should have been able to have this information provided to us.
Well, I think in terms of the map that we thought, municipality and state thought that we had sufficient information for the purposes of this particular decision. So we thought it was adequate. Sometimes some other people look at it, they don't think it's adequate. And we're okay with that. That's what we find out when we go through the process. And if somebody really doesn't like it or doesn't think it's sufficient, we change the map. Okay? Now, as to contacting the property owners, I really can't speak to that. I don't know about that part of the process.
You know, this is the final thing, and there are other people, but, you know, we haven't had proper notification of the property owners. We don't have adequate maps. The information that we have received and that we are expected to vote on has been late in its arrival. And so I cannot support the motion that is currently being presented. Commissioner Mulcahy and then Commissioner Ferguson.
I was just going to say that I thought that we weren't sure on notification. We just weren't getting confirmation that notifications went out. We just don't have apps. You are just able to commit to us that those specific people. Is that true? Is that the case?
That's correct.
Right. So with those two, I would be prepared to support the original motion with those two conditions, the notification and the improved maps before going, that information would be provided to the Assembly. With those two conditions, I'd be prepared to support.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Ferguson.
I'm back. I'm looking at Exhibit F. I'm looking on page 4, and I'm reading item 11, and I don't see anything about maps. So where was that covered?
Through the chair, Mr. Ferguson, that's referencing page 4 from your December 10th packet.
Okay, I've got page 4 of the supplemental information, or, pardon me.
It's December 10th, by the way, on page 4 of the December 10th memo.
I was on the wrong one.
Yeah, that's understandable. There's a lot of paper here, but that's where it is.
Part of the issue with maps is we're trying to understand the plan that's being presented. To understand the plan, we have to be able to read the maps. And so it's not just other people. It's the commissioners are having difficulty in reading the maps. And so we have to have legible maps that we can read, and if we don't have that, that's a difficulty for us. We have a motion. If we table that motion, we could keep the motion, get the information we wanted, and then would that not work?
Yes, we can postpone and ask for some additional information to be provided from staff.
Would that be in the motion of a amended motion that we discuss first, or?
Well, first we have to come out of the committee of the whole,
Yeah,
and I think we've gone round and round enough so that we can do that. I need a motion to come out of the committee of the whole, if we're ready.
The next step after
Okay.
we come out. And once we come out, would it be a second motion?
It'd be a motion to postpone.
Okay, thank you. I'll make a motion, we come out of committee of the whole.
All right, may I have a second? To come out of the committee of the whole? May I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Robinson. Is there any objection to coming out of the committee of the whole? All right, seeing and hearing none, we are now out of the committee of the whole. Commissioner Ferguson, did you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I tried to.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we postpone this issue, postpone Mr. Phelps's motion until the second meeting in January, or what? I'm trying to come up with a date. Or was that the one we weren't going to meet on?
No, that is,
There's no cases yet scheduled for the 14th, but they are.
Okay, then I'll make, what's the first?
for the 14th?
Let's go to the first one in February.
Although they are wanting to schedule a work session on that day,
Well,
but that hasn't been discussed.
all right, so we'll move this to February 4th. Is that your motion?
I'll make a motion that we postpone this to February 4th.
And included in that motion is a request for additional,
Additional maps, clear maps, and information on notifying the affected landowners.
confirmation?
Confirmation.
Yeah, all right. That's been moved. Is there a second? Is there a second? It's been seconded by Commissioner Robinson. Given the prior discussion, let's have a vote.
This vote is on my motion.
Yes. It's a motion to postpone till February 4th with a request from staff for a confirmation that the 14 private property owners have been notified and for clarity in the maps. A yes vote is for postponement, a no vote is obviously not. All right, that motion passes. Thank you very much. We look forward to working with staff to resolve these remaining issues for the Chugach Access Plan. All right, we're now moving on to the regular agenda. Case 2012-134. We need a motion to postpone this case, which has been postponed several times at the request of the petitioner. I would entertain a motion for postponement to the January 7th meeting. Commissioner Ferguson. Seconded by Commissioner Pruz. Is there an objection? Seeing and hearing none, that motion is approved. We are now moving on to where's the snow store? Oh, yeah, okay, this is the last one. All right, we're now moving on to case 2012-141. The petitioner is the Municipality of Anchorage Parks and Recreation. The request is the master plan review of a public parks master plan for a total acreage of 60.97 acres. May we have a presentation, please, from staff?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Parks and Rec Department requests that
Excuse me, I have not identified the procedure for a public hearing. So if you could wait for just 1 second. The procedure by which the public may speak to the commission at its meeting is, 1, after the staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, the chair will ask for public testimony on the issue. 2, persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the commission rules of procedure. A, petitioners, including all his/her representatives, 10 minutes. Part of this time may be reserved for rebuttal. For clarification, since the municipality of Anchorage is the petitioner, does your staff presentation constitute the 10 minutes, or is that time allocated to the consultant?
Through the chair, Madam Chair, will be separate.
You'll be separate. All right. Thank you very much. And then representatives of groups, community councils, PTAs, 5 minutes. I have been informed that all of the officers of the Bayshore Community Council are here this evening. So we can have, as I understand it, one member representing the Bayshore Community Council who can have up to 5 minutes. If other officers of the Bayshore Community Council wish to testify, they may do so as individuals and will have 3 minutes each. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the Commission. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the Commission. And when the individuals come forward, please clearly state your name for the record, and if it's more than 6 letters, please spell it. An individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Planning and Zoning Commission takes. Appeals must be filed with the clerk's office within 20 days after the Planning and Zoning Commission's final decision. Any individual may request written findings from any commission decision within 7 days. Thank you very much. Now may we have the staff presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Parks and Rec Department requests that the Commission approve the Campbell Creek Estuary Natural Area Master Plan. The master plan is consistent with the 2006 Anchorage Bowl Natural Resource and Recreation Facility Plan for the Southwest District upon resolution of the division's recommendations. Those recommendations are on page 4. There are 6 conditions of approval. So the department recommends approval of the master plan subject to those 6 conditions. Now, Condition 1 states allow for an overlook site at the bottom of the bluff to provide access to the resource protection area. That condition comes from comments that were received from long-range planning based on our long-range plans and or on our adopted plans, and also from the municipal non-motorized transportation coordinator, both of whom are present and sitting to my left. And then Condition 2, which is also a potentially or a controversial condition, is include a discussion of how the access to the Tony Knowles Coastal Trail will be accommodated if future trail alignment studies identify this area for coastal trail corridor. This condition is controversial to people who oppose the coastal trail being pushed through this area. However, this, adding language to this effect to the master plan has really nothing to do with that. We simply want this plan not to preclude a connecting trail to a coastal trail should coastal trail ever take place. So this isn't about mandating trails in where some of the framers of this plan don't want them to be. But we just don't want to prohibit them. Now, these conditions have been reviewed by the petitioner, the Parks and Rec Department. They've agreed to these conditions as well. I just say that as background. That's all I have for my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions. This is, of course, the case that we had the work session on.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Ferguson has a question of staff.
Do we have any idea where the Tony Knowles Trail would go in this area?
We do. Lori Skanke here to my left has brought copies for all of the commission of a potential alignment. And I can distribute those to you if you'd like.
We would like to see them. How would this area, I'm trying to avoid using the word park, how would this area somehow prohibit the development of the trail? I don't understand that.
I apologize. Could you repeat the question?
How would this area, and I'm trying not to use the word park, how would this area impact or use the word prohibit the trail? I don't understand that.
Well, there should be a paragraph in the plan that says that if that makes allowances for there to be a trail that connects to the coastal trail, and if such a trail ever occurred in the future, it would have to go through a public facility site plan review, because this would be a major community. This would be a big project, and there would be a second review by the commission on such a project.
In the matter of disclosure, one of the routes of the Tony Knowles Trail that had been considered maybe a decade ago went in my front yard. So just understand that. I'm back to how does this plan before us prohibit in any way, shape, or form the trail?
Through the chair, Mr. Ferguson, I'm Lori Skanke. I'm the non-motorized transportation coordinator, and I actually was the project manager for the south extension of the Coastal Trail project. What Francis handed out was just one of the alignments. It's by no means a final, it was just the recommended one. But to answer your question, I will try. The plan that is before us this evening talks about how there should be no access at all down to the bluff, and even talks about, like down the bluff, even talks about having fences to keep people out. Yet in another part of the plan, it mentions that you really shouldn't do that. So we just want to make sure that there's some interaction back and forth. And I know your difficulty with using the word park, but usually if a trail is going anywhere near a facility, such as this regional natural area, there would likely be a link. And that's all that we want to make sure happens.
Yeah, but this plan for this regional natural area has a trail down to the bottom of the bluff now, right?
There was certain wording that did not mention that. So it kind of stopped people going down.
From the applicant's testimony during the work session, I came away with a very clear understanding that there was a lookout, an overview site at the bottom of the bluff. And so I'm confused.
Well, and I guess when I heard overview, it's like you're fenced in. So you're not going anywhere.
But if the overview is at the bottom of the bluff, you've got access to the bottom of the bluff. Do you agree with that or not?
I do, but you're in one point at the bottom of the bluff. So it was just that if there should be a trail going through in anywhere near this area, we just wanted to have a connection.
I don't see that this prohibits that connection, is my point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May we hear from the petitioner's representative?
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, my name is Dwayne Adams with USKH. First name is D-W-A-Y-N-E. With me tonight, I also have Mr. Mark McCaffrey with Parks and Recreation, as well as Mr. Phil Shepard, who's with Great Land Trust. We had a work session, so I will just touch on the things that we did discuss. As you know, this is a property that is owned by the municipality of Anchorage with an overlying conservation easement. As part of our process, the conservation easement did require the preparation of a master plan, which is what you have before you tonight. Specifically, what was intended is that the master plan deal with the things that public properties tend to create, which is there will be some traffic, there are resources that need to be protected, and there needs to be a certain way that that happens. And that's what this master plan dealt with. It went through a site assessment process. It identified that there is an upland area and a lowland area. The lowland area is primarily marshland. It's a pretty precious resource with a lot of waterfowl, herbaceous materials, sedges that are greatly treasured by wildlife as well as by humans. And therein lies the problem, is divining protection of that resource while allowing the ability of the people to see and enjoy the resources below. With that conservation easement were 3 areas. If you look at the northern section off of Selkirk Drive and Lennox Drive, 2 areas that provide for limited trailhead development with parking areas and appropriate appurtenances. There is a restricted use area that had prescribed opportunities for development within there that protected the resource but allowed public circulation and overlooks as well as some other rudimentary improvements. And down below in the area at the toe of the bluff, a resource protection area. It did allow for it did not restrict public access to that area, but it did have a very strong requirement that the resource be protected. We went through a relatively extensive public process. What you see are 3 stakeholder meetings and 2 public meetings that were very well attended, as many as 110 at the very first public meeting. And from that came a public process that defined a range of activities that could take place on the land, and with those range of activities from least development to most development, a selection, a menu, if you will, of different activities that could occur that you see down the left side of this. And generally what you see is that there's a proclivity to stay to the left side of this, to protect the resource that was there. And from that came the master plan that you see before you on page 12. Now, it provides for 3 overlooks, an open area, a meadow with trails that connect to a trailhead. And it also recognized that there are resources in the upland as well as the lowland area that deserve protection. There's a moose bedding area and calving area in the northeastern portion of the site, that there are opportunities for overlook at the top of the bluff. But let me just touch on the one thing that staff mentioned, which was that overlook, that there's some controversy whether it's the top of the bottom of the bluff. And I refer to page 15 of the master plan. And I'll read from that with respect to what's intended. Overlook 3, the third proposed viewing platform is west of the first at the foot of the bluff. So it is at the foot of the bluff. The intention of the platform is to experience the estuary and provide up-close views of the creek and vegetation. The primary concerns are to protect estuary soils, existing vegetation, and avoid disturbing the existing mammal corridor. There are no fences. There are nothing that protects that. There might be signage that discusses how sensitive that habitat and urges people to stay out, but there is no definite prohibitive restriction of that access necessarily. But when we say access, what does access constitute? Is visual access, oral access, AURAL, the ability to hear the birds and to hear the wind rustling through the aspen trees at the top. That ability to experience is also very important to smell the estuary and see the habitat that's out there. So the experience is there. With that, to address staff comments, we have no trouble with any of the staff resources or staff comments. We do believe that the text does address the one comment that was raised, I think, by Mr. Ferguson, but we have no other problems other than that. We can even, by demonstrating this language, I think, live with the other one as well. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right. You have approximately 5 minutes left for rebuttal. Are there any questions from the commissioners? All right, thank you very much.
Thank
We
you.
will now open the hearing to the public. Would those people who would like to testify please come forward at this time?
Madam Chair, for
Yes.
the use of testimony, I'll leave this up if that's all right.
All right, thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you.
Appreciate it. Please come forward and clearly state your name for the record.
My name is Barbara Carlson. I have some handouts I'd like to give to the commission. I apologize that I didn't have this ready in advance for your packet. Pressed for time.
Are you speaking as an individual?
I'm speaking as head of Friends of the Anchorage Coastal Wildlife Refuge. And I'd like to give these to
Friends of the Anchorage Coastal Wildlife Refuge. All right, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Madam Yoshimura and members of the Commission. I speak on behalf of Friends of the Anchorage Coastal Wildlife Refuge, also known as FAR. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization of citizens and professionals whose mission is to preserve the integrity and biological diversity of the Anchorage Coastal Wildlife Refuge. We help monitor the health of the refuge and facilitate the annual snow goose, sandhill crane survey, and the Anchorage Coastal Beluga survey. We also participate in the Congress-mandated Alaska Marine Mammal Stranding Network and help with strandings, necropsies, and salvage for educational purposes. These activities provide unprecedented opportunities for citizens to appreciate and learn about the wildlife that depend upon the refuge. I have been involved with the estuary project since before Greatland Trust applied for the conservation grants, which helped fund it. At the invitation of Greatland Trust, I read drafts of proposals and made recommendations about important habitat wildlife in the vicinity. It has been our pleasure to work as an active stakeholder with the municipality, Greatland Trust, the USKH design team, and citizens to help create this outstanding master plan, which will allow public enjoyment while helping to conserve this unique resource, as the vision statement declares, in perpetuity for future generations. FAR recommends do approve the Campbell Creek Estuary Natural Area Master Plan as amended by the Parks and Recreation Commission on October 11th. However, we have serious concerns about several planning department staff recommendations. FAR objects to 3 staff recommendations as written. FAR does not agree with staff recommendation number 1 because in light of the staff report discussion, it is unclear. Remedy this by adding discourage physical access to the Resource Protection Area, RPA, by pedestrians between March and late October, and prohibit bicycle access between March and December. Passive access viewing from Overlook is year-round. Reasons? The master plan does provide an overlook site near the bottom of the bluff to provide access for public viewing of sensitive Class A wetlands and the wider variety of wildlife that frequent the habitat from marsh to bluff. One purpose of Overlooks 2 and 3 is to discourage social trails by helping citizens appreciate and learn more about the area without chasing away wildlife. If people go down into the marsh, there will be no wildlife to see from the viewing platform because it will have been displaced. Educational signage will explain the need to discourage pedestrian traffic between March and October when the Resource Protection Area supports breeding, brood rearing, and migrating birds who need the habitat, when habitat is vulnerable to damage by foot traffic, and for prohibiting bicycles between March through December, when traffic would damage the fragile habitat and displace wildlife March through October. FAR categorically objects to the implications of staff recommendation number 2. Reasons? Inclusion of an extension of the Tony Nose Coastal Trail would provide easy pedestrian, bicycle, and dog access to the protected resource area, altering Class A wetlands and displacing the very wildlife this project seeks to conserve. It is important to note, under background, that this property was purchased with help of conservation grant funds whose conditions are legally binding. Inclusion of a link to the Tony Nose Coastal Trail would detract from the quiet natural setting. And I'm going to qualify this because someone told me there was a problem with someone misrepresenting themselves as a community council member. I have permission from Dan Burgess at Sand Lake Community Council to make this statement. Both Bayshore Clack Community Council and Sand Lake Community Council have voiced their strong opposition to including physical access into the RPA and Anchorage Coastal Wildlife Refuge and oppose any wide paved or coastal trail through the Campbell Creek Estuary Natural Area. FAR does not concur with part of staff recommendation number 4. Specifically, we object to increasing the number of parking spaces and paving the parking lot unless it's permeable. To fix this, insert this wording. The parking lot will not be expanded to accommodate more cars, and it will not be paved unless it is a permeable paving. Reasons for no expansion of number of parking spaces. A natural resource area is not the same as a park, and different rules and expectations apply. In order for this location to remain a quiet place where the public may enjoy nature and wildlife viewing in perpetuity, it cannot draw a large number of cars and people. Increasing the number of parking spaces would degrade both the habitat and the ability of citizens to enjoy the natural setting. Adding more parking spaces would unnecessarily destroy more habitat in this small natural area. For no paving?
Thank you very much. We do have a question. Commissioner Ferguson.
Does your organization charge dues, membership dues?
We do.
Approximately how many members do you have?
$15 a person, or how many?
Approximately how many members do you have?
About 300.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mulcahy.
Yeah, question. During the work session, there was a discussion that the parking lot may have to be expanded to allow emergency vehicle turnaround. Have you thought that through?
That's okay with us as long as it's not providing a place for more cars to come to the small area.
Thank you. Commissioner Pruz.
Yeah, one of the reasons you give for no paving is to increase, because it would increase concentrated runoff. So if you don't have it paved, what would you propose to do about the silt runoff?
It would be absorbed into the natural landscape more easily.
Well, today when that happens, there's stormwater prevention plans and silt fences and everything to keep it out of the estuary or out of the water drainage, and that's why paving is, because it's cleaner water actually going into it. So I was just curious about that. It's kind of a conflict whereas people are spending lots and lots of money to keep the water clean going into by paving versus leaving it gravel.
No, paving would concentrate the runoff, and that's not the hugest of our issues.
Well, actually, it will shed it, but thank you.
Commissioner Robinson.
Thank you. Ms. Carlson, thanks for your testimony. Could you, in your discussions, and it does sound like you've had quite a number of conversations with the Great Land Trust, both you and the Great Land Trust, talked about minimizing the number of vehicles and the number of people, and whether that's in part through time, but but also allowing for larger groups of kids or whatnot into the area. I'm just, curious. Was the number 10, the 10 parking spaces, was that part of the conversations one way or the other, or is that, is really that just your opinion that that's what constitutes small? In other words, why not 20, why not 15? In any of your conversations, did you feel you had sort of an agreed upon number of 10, or are you just advocating that, now that number is shown on the map, that's what it should be capped at?
Actually, we had quite a lot of discussion about that in the stakeholders group. As Mr. Shepard said, we felt that it would be safer to start small and then to expand if necessary. But something important to remember about this is a very small natural area. If you bring large numbers of vehicles. There's already going to be people walking and biking here. So if you have a large number of cars also, we figure that a small parking lot is better for a small natural area.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Carlson, for your testimony. Will the next person please come forward?
Good evening. I think I can keep my opening comments to 3 minutes. My name is David Carter. I'm Vice President of the Bayshore Clat Community Council, have been for a number of years. You will hear from others on the council. I was also privileged to participate in the stakeholder group. I was one of the 2 people from Bayshore Clat, and so I was involved in that process too. And there was no discussion whatsoever of the coastal trail in terms of including it in the master plan that I recall. This piece of property is a unique little piece of property, and it's meant to preserve access and preserve protection of wildlife and the fauna. I was also involved through the lengthy process in this community in terms of the South Coastal Trail project that Ms. Shanke mentioned to you. And as we all know, that was a huge, hard-fought battle, and it ended up with the Federal Highway Administration saying we won't authorize a permit through there. We are concerned that in this packet G1 that I guess you folks have, it says that no public comments have been received as of the writing and I know it's going to be hard to read, but this is a letter from Joseph Geifer at the Alaska Department of Fish and Game to the Municipality of Anchorage Planning and Zoning Commission dated December 7th. I didn't see that in the packet information. There's also a very thorough set of comments from Rick Sennett. Mr. Sennett was with Fish and Game for many, many years, the biologist responsible for the Anchorage Coastal Wildlife Refuge. His comments, and I can leave copies with you, are dated November 30th. And he rebuts the comments of Mr. Tobish and Ms. Shanke in terms of what they feel is required under municipal documents. And it's a very thorough and straightforward review. And I'd be happy to leave the copy I have with you, and then you can make...
I do believe we do have those now. They have been laid on the table.
Okay, it's important that you consider those, and because this document, as I read it, says this master plan will not be subject to further review. And so the great concern of those of us that were involved in dealing with the coastal trail issue is that this is kind of an in-run at the very end of all this public process, again, with the stakeholder group and the public meetings, and then at the very last minute we get these comments about we wanted to mention coastal access for a future coastal trail. I thought I might have heard the eventual trail, and that's like a Freudian slip if there ever was one. It shouldn't go there, and this body should not approve of the master plan with that recommendation in it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Will the next person please come forward? Oh, I'm sorry. Please come back. I apologize. Commissioner Cruz has a question.
Yeah, I have a question about where the department recommends considering widening the trails from 3 to 5 feet where appropriate.
I think our preference is to stay with the 3-foot. It's just less of a footprint, obviously, and we're not anticipating a great deal of people in this area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Now will the next person please come forward?
Good evening. My name is Bob Mitchell. I live at 241 East 23rd Avenue. I'm speaking to you just as a citizen, but in interest of full disclosure, I'll note that I am a member of the FAR organization, and I've been a volunteer with them for 3 years doing migratory bird survey and beluga survey. Just a few thoughts. The Campbell Creek Estuary property was purchased by Great Land Trust to maintain a connection with the Anchorage Coastal Wildlife Refuge in order to conserve the values of all their existing resources, including undisturbed upland and estuarine habitat, water source resource quality, biologic diversity, native plant species, large habitat patches, and to promote species health and survival. The increasing physical access to the resource protection area and inclusion of an extension of the Tony Knolls Coastal Trail is, in my opinion, in direct conflict with these goals. The proposed paths and the viewing platforms, while they would give residents access to unique nature and wildlife viewing opportunities without disturbing wildlife, or could do it without disturbing wildlife. However, physical access into these wetlands between March and the end of October for pedestrians and between March and December for bicycles would damage important habitat and disturb the wildlife and would be in conflict with Great Land Trust goals. I'm a dog lover. However, I sincerely believe that dogs have no place in the Campbell Creek Estuary Natural Area. Their presence has readily observable effects on the wildlife, especially on the migratory birds which breed and brood there. I'm also a very fond user of the Tony Knolls Coastal Trail. However, I strongly believe extension of the trail would be a negative intrusion. The Campbell Creek Estuary Natural Area, as is the entire Coastal Wildlife Refuge, is a most unique natural amenity in immediate proximity to our urbanization. And unless we're very careful, selective, and minimal in our use of it, we can quickly destroy it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Commissioner Ferguson.
I'm interested in your restriction in the wintertime to pedestrian access. I live on Potter Marsh. I overlook a major portion of Potter Marsh. I enjoy the wintertime activities that take place down there. Hockey games, which won't take place here, but we have people walking, snowshoeing all the time down there. They trespass on a part of my property when they do this. Why do you have a concern for pedestrian access, say, from the 1st of November to the 1st of April, even? I understand once birds arrive. There's no debate there. But during the winter, what's your concern with the access?
Well, I believe that, first of all, bicycle traffic, particularly during that period of time, has an effect on what wildlife is there at the time in a manner that, more so than pedestrians who are moving slowly. Bicycle appears suddenly and disappears suddenly. And these have a behavioral effect on some of the wildlife there, in my opinion.
I would guess in wintertime down there you may have fox, coyote, muskrat. What other, maybe some short-tailed shrews, maybe some weasels, maybe some mink. But I wonder, I don't understand the prohibition that you're asking for there.
Well, I can't answer your question satisfactorily. I'm sorry.
Thank you for your testimony, sir.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Bruce.
Yeah, do you see any conflict with the current activities that are present on Campbell Lake?
Pardon me?
Do you see any conflict with this conservative deal, any conflict with the current activities on Campbell Lake?
On Campbell Lake?
Yeah, low plains, the noise, the boating, the water skiing.
I can't respond to that. I don't spend time on Campbell Lake.
Okay. Well,
However, if I may, I would like to respond to your earlier question to a previous speaker about paving.
Okay.
And one thing that occurs to me is that there are types of permeable paving which might be considered for these applications if the parking areas do need to be paved. There is available permeable paving which allows water to settle into the soil structure right in that location without runoff.
All right, thank you very much for your testimony. Will the next person please come forward?
Commissioner Yoshimura and members of the Commission, my name is Vivian Mendenhall, VIVIAN-MENDENHALL. I'm a professional wildlife biologist. I have a PhD and 20 years experience in management of wild birds. Now I'm doing research actually on the cranes in the nature area in the coastal refuge. I'm also a member of FAR, but I'm testifying as myself. The master plan should continue to protect the natural habitats and native species of this nature area, not park, as a first priority. I'd like to make some quick points from my work to underline, although I think many commissioners are aware of it, why we need to protect them from disturbance. Large birds are all nervous on their nests, including cranes, eagles, loons, which we have a few, and swans. There's a pair of cranes nesting in the nature area marsh, always on the same spot, probably same ones for the last 6 years. Whole coastal refuge has maybe a dozen. Cranes nest in small freshwater lake marshes at the bottom of the bluff. They can't use other areas of the marsh in general, which are salty. There's also a bald eagle nest at the west end of the nature area. In my research, I record the crane habitats, behavior, and reactions when they're alarmed. Some events make the cranes anxious, but they settle down. And by the way, that includes float planes from Campbell Lake, which climb out over that area. The reason being that the planes never come close to the cranes, and they have learned that. However, some things do make them run away from the nest, especially if they come too close. I've seen it happen with bicycles, dogs, and people. A bird normally gets up at times, turns its eggs, or its mate takes over, but then it sits right down in about 1 minute again. And the parents stay very close to the nest where they can protect it. But when a crane is frightened, I've seen it run as far as 50 yards from the nest and stay away for at least 5 minutes. That's when enemies like eagles, ravens, or coyotes get to steal the eggs. There's always some predation, but a great majority of it can occur when disturbance is going on. Cranes or eagles may in fact abandon their nest if they feel in enough danger, or they may not return next year. And wet marsh habitat is often damaged when people or fat tire bicycles use it during the summer, as has already been mentioned. The public loves seeing cranes in our coastal area, and we can provide them with that opportunity without harming the birds. But to keep cranes in the nature area, and eagles too, we must have the option of closing the marsh to public access during nesting. The Planning Department wants to add access to the nature area to the refuge or a coastal trail. However, my research and other people's have shown that would probably mean the end of these large nesting birds. Protection of natural habitat and native species are among the goals of Anchorage 2020 and the Parks Plan, as the petitioner and also Rick Sinnott point out in great detail. The community actually does protect other nesting birds in parks, such as the loons in Goose Lake. The municipality already provides access to the south part of the coastal refuge via at least 5 trails and 4 parks. So why do we need it here as well, in the nature area? I urge you to approve appropriate management and enjoyment of this area. Please don't add a trail easement and access, year-round access, and do retain the option for seasonal closure.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I don't see any questions in the queue. Will the next person please come forward?
Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. My name is Bob Hoffman. I am President of the Bayshore Clatt Community Council, and I'm here to speak in that capacity. Some of the comments will probably be repeated. I'm sorry to do that. We have as a council, have a direct and long-standing interest in this area in the Coastal Wildlife Refuge. Many of the constituents will be directly impacted by any additional actions as recommended by staff with regard to this parcel in the draft master plan. two of our officers, you've met one already, served on the stakeholder group. Each of them has spent many hours of their own time working with the group to obtain the consensus on the entire Campbell Creek Estuary Master Plan. We as the council formally endorse the process, and as a result of the resultant draft master plan now before you, October 4th of this year during a regular meeting, and as an agenda item, we passed a resolution supporting the plan as it is written. However, our endorsement came with the specific conditions that were well known by the project consultant and the Great Land Trust personnel. That endorsement came with the caveat that no access be given to the sensitive habitat area below the bluff. It has been well documented that any intrusion in this habitat will disturb and potentially displace the very wildlife people appreciate. Likewise, the bluff vegetation cannot withstand an onslaught of curious truckers. Well, we realize that full well that despite best efforts, some will venture out into the sensitive habitat regardless of any warnings, signings, and such. Our council specifically requests that access into the marsh not be promoted, and that fact was included in the draft master plan. Subsequently to our approving the draft plan, we now find that two municipal staff members have decided to add additional provisions allowing bluff access. I believe those are the staff comments in your packets. These are contrary not only to the draft master plan, but the entire conservation easement. The municipality of Anchorage had ample opportunity to be included in the master plan process, but chose not to. Only afterwards were these comments added. It is my understanding that other comments were made, but also contrary to the easement itself. One comment, including a life safety issue, will be addressed. That's the parking issue. We are adamantly opposed to the staff comments that access be granted to the marsh and that a coastal trail corridor or easement of any kind be included in this document. This is especially troublesome after going through the public process involving several hundred hours of community involvement were completed before they expressed their wishes. We as a council find their conduct quite upsetting. On the December 5th regular council meeting, it was reaffirmed by this council membership that should these provisions be added to the draft master plan, we will revoke our previous resolution of support granted on October 4th. Please do not allow such major and contrary changes to be allowed in the draft master plan. In your packet on page 4, items number 1 and 2 are what specifically I am opposed to, I meaning the council. That is all I have.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Mulcahy has a question, followed by Commissioner Robinson, so please remain at the podium.
Yeah, thanks very much for testimony. I think I'm clear, but just on, I don't know, do you still have your map up there? Did that have that Overlook 3 on the map? Are you, in your testimony, you were saying that Overlook 3 was added, that what you're objecting to, or is there was other language that added additional access? You see what I'm talking about, Overlook 3?
It's additional access beyond Outlook 3.
So you're okay with 3?
No, not really. But it's in there. It's in the plan. We approved it. It sounds like they want additional access beyond that point out into the refuge.
No further objection to 3. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Robinson?
I withdraw. That was my same question. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any other comments, questions? Thank you very much for your testimony. Will the next person please come forward?
Good evening, members of the Commission. Excuse me a moment here. My name is Wayne Hall, and I have lived in Anchorage since 1978. I just want to say that I support the version of the Estuary Master Plan that was amended by Parks and Rec on October 11th. And although I don't agree with everything in it, I think it represents a reasonable compromise for managing what I think is a very special area. Now there is this last minute but major change to allow for or not to preclude more development and an increased use in what is supposed to be a natural area. After all the negotiating, testimony, and compromising that has been done, this seems to be an attempt to sneak in something new. I've reviewed with and agree with Rick Sinnott's point-by-point rebuttal of all the alleged reasons that this was added after that clock had run out. But even beyond that, if this was so critical, why was it not part of the public process from the beginning? Perhaps because it would have drawn too much opposition. In any event, if an extension of the coastal trail is ever attempted, it will have to be located outside of the natural area, and will have to win or lose that battle on its own merits, not as a last-minute addition to the existing or to the October 11th version of the area master plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other questions in the queue. Thank you. Will the next person please come forward?
Hi, my name is Cheryl Schroyer, Shroyer, and I'm a stakeholder that's been participating in this process. I am a member of FAR and Anchorage Audubon, and I'm just very excited about this whole estuary area. It is just going to be so exciting. It is exciting. I just came down here tonight to see what would happen. I didn't have any prepared remarks, but I've got some notes here. I am part of the long history that Dwayne referred to of the Coastal Trail, and I suppose I got really involved when I was president of the Ocean View Community Council. And the master plan is really generally very well done, capturing the objectives to protect the estuary with limited development and impact. But then we see the department recommendation 1 and 2, allowing for the overlook access to the area, and then the Tony E. Knowles Coastal Trail access. And I strongly disagree with this and recommend they be taken out. I'm just totally shocked that the municipality had to lob this bomb. I mean, did you really have to do that? This is such a great project, and you toss this in here, and it's exploding. We could have 100 people from here till the cows come home testifying on this. What has that got to do with this fabulous thing we're trying to achieve here? I'm just shocked. Lori said, oh, if the trail doesn't go through, you have to have a mention. What are we talking about here? It's all about the estuary. Dwayne said, well, we want the resource to be protected. Well, of course we do. And if you allow access to the coastal trail, it's ruined. Absolutely, totally ruined. What is the point? Anyway, I just thought I'd tell you how surprised I am. And it can't be both. You can't protect, and you can't have everyone from the coastal trail tromping through there. So I think the only protection we have is the massive quantities of mosquitoes that would turn most of the people away. But still, I do ask that they withdraw this ridiculous last-minute bomb. It doesn't do anybody any good. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I don't see any questions. Will the next person please come forward?
Good evening, Madam Commissioner, honorable members of the Commission. My name is Alita Pillick. I'll spell it. It's difficult. A-L-E-T-A-P-I-L-L-I-C-K. I live here in Anchorage, have for the last 11 years. When I moved here, I was astounded by the wildlife right within the city. If you've lived anywhere else and you move to a place like Anchorage, you realize what an exceptional place it is. And in fact, every time I read about what people in Anchorage appreciate, it's the wildlife that just about tops the list. So I understand land use issues are very difficult for the Commission. We try as Alaskans to preserve everything for the maximum number of people, but sometimes there is a conflict between wildlife and recreational users, and that's the issue that's framed for you tonight. I think we heard quite a bit from the stakeholders and from the municipality about the long work that went into their October 11th plan. And my understanding is that generally there was a recognition that if you expand access for pedestrians and other recreational users down in the marshland, you're going to degrade the habitat. I'm an active birder in Anchorage, basically above the bluff viewing with scopes and binoculars. And one thing I can tell you is even from several hundred yards, those nesting cranes know you're there, and they're wary and they're watching you the whole time. And you know, you even when you're several hundred yards away, sometimes you feel like you may be intruding on their territory. What we have is so precious. I'm really worried about last-minute, off-the-cuff amendments being made to a plan that was considered quite extensively and is well thought out and has biological science as backing. So I urge you to reject the recommendations, to expand access, expand parking spaces. I agree with Commissioner Ferguson. I'm not really sure why exactly we have to make a public statement at this time that, yes, you can come on down Coastal Trail if you want someday. I mean, I didn't see anything in the plan that positively prohibited, so why are we using this as a platform to expand the Coastal Trail? I thank you for your attention, and if you have any questions for me, I would be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see anyone in the queue. Will the next person please come forward?
Madam Chair, thank you. My name is Julian Mason. I own a piece of property that you can't quite see on that map, but it's on Campbell Lake, and then it comes out along the creek, and the property is very, very similar to some of what you're talking about here. I want to ask you for a minute to think about a hypothetical headline. Planning and Zoning Commission approves master plan for 300,000 citizens of Anchorage who own the property, but they're discouraged from using it. They're discouraged from using it. In fact, no trails will be built so they can gain access to it. Now, that's what you're being asked to do by a number of people that are testifying here tonight. I have no objection at all to closure of areas when it's necessary to close them, perhaps for nesting bird purposes. But the whole coastal wildlife refuge is now open to people. Dogs are in it. People are in it. We hunt in it. There's no reason to impose these kinds of restrictions that you're being asked to impose on property that belongs to all the citizens of Anchorage. Now, the master plan is well thought out, but to approve a master plan that on its face discourages people from going into the area, discourages people from using the most beautiful part of it, which is the estuary itself, makes no sense at all to me as a citizen of the city. For example, and there's confusion about this in the plan to me, it appears that the plan would prohibit or could prohibit any trails below the bluff, and yet there's to be a viewing station or an overlook sort of above and below the bluff. There's no reason to prohibit trails. That doesn't need to be done as part of this plan. There may be a good opportunity to build trails there at some point in the future. But I urge you, don't approve a master plan that on its face discourages people from using it. Fish and wildlife management is not what we're talking about here. And the sorts of restrictions that you're being asked to impose on this property are not imposed on the wildlife refuge that the people from FAR are purporting to protect. So what I ask you to do, approve the master plan, but without these restrictions to discourage any and all of us from using it. Thank you very much.
If you just stay at the podium, Commissioner Dean has a question.
Thank you. Through the chair, could you tell me, are you on the south side of the lake or the north side of the lake?
Well, more on the west end of the lake, but I don't live there. I own a relatively large parcel of property there with parts, undeveloped.
Okay. I'm a little bit familiar with that area, not super. So your property, is it to the, I guess, to the south of the creek then, at the mouth, or?
Yes, nothing for me ever runs north, south, east, west, but yes.
Yeah, it kind of winds through there, and it's a little bit tough.
I've been here 35 years, and I still can't point north reliably.
So what are your plans for your property? Do you use it as a recreational property or a cabin in the summer, or?
No, I think ultimately it will be developed along the lines that the other property on Campbell Lake is, but some of it is effectively, I think practically speaking, undevelopable because it becomes an estuary and becomes wetlands.
Okay, so
are you in the market?
No. I'm just trying to understand where you're at and what the uses of your property are. Since you are bordering, do you share a border with this parcel?
Do not.
Okay. How do you feel about the noise at that end of the lake with the airplanes, boats, et cetera, that do happen down there, since you're fairly familiar with it?
Well, it's not, in my view, a problem for wildlife, but I can give you a better example that I really am familiar with, or two. One is Sand Lake. I row on Sand Lake as part of the Anchorage Rowing Association. We have loons. We have all sorts of nesting birds, and we're in there all the time, avoiding the water skiers as best we can, and the float planes. It's not a problem for the wildlife on Sand Lake. It's not a problem that I can observe for the wildlife on Campbell Lake. And think about Westchester Lagoon. We run, hunt, hike, fish, and kayak where all those nesting birds are, right in the middle of Westchester Lagoon. We're not disturbing the birds at Westchester Lagoon. I think Campbell Lake is the same way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mason, I have a question for you in regards to then what, in your opinion, is the purpose of a conservation easement?
I think of the conservation easement, I've been involved with some others. I think of it as prohibiting what I think of more traditionally as development on the land. Because I would certainly hate to see that land have houses built on it, for example. But I don't see anything in conflict with the conservation easement concept and letting people use the property and get onto the property. I'm not suggesting that there shouldn't be times when access would be prohibited, but I don't think there's anything inconsistent with a conservation easement and letting people use the property. You know, the refuges in Alaska, both the federal ones and the state ones, are generally open, for example, to hunting and to people. And we fought wars with the federal government to avoid just the kind of thing we're talking about here.
Okay, thank you. Can you give me an example of a conservation easement, another example of a conservation easement that would have park-like amenities?
The property in Stuckagon that belonged to Joe Henry is subject, I believe, now to conservation easement, and it has not been transferred. It has not been transferred to the state, but that is one example of a conservation easement.
Are there improvements on that property before or after the conservation easement was put into place?
Some wouldn't call them improvements. What is on the property now is a series of, some of them are social trails, and some of them are trails that have been far more developed than social trails, I mean, in the sense of chainsaws and that sort of thing. The plan for that property would then be to develop real trails, sustainable type trails that would take you into the Long Lake area and up over Near Point into the Long Lake area.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it. Thanks. Will the next person please come forward? Is there anyone else who wishes to testify?
Evening. My name is Gary Baugh. I'm a Great Land Trust Board member, and I was a member of the Stakeholders Committee, and I attended all of the stakeholder meetings, and I've spent a lot of time talking to USKH about the master plan. I'd like to point out that the upland area that you see it's a nice area, but it doesn't offer anything that you can't find at Kincaid or Bicentennial or several other parks in Anchorage. The really unique part of the estuary is the estuary, and that's what makes it special. All the fundraising and public outreach featured the estuary. At the last stakeholders meeting that was held standing down in the estuary, there was unanimous agreement that you really don't appreciate or understand what the estuary is unless you're down in it and see it and smell it and experience it from that level. The conservation easement, well, I'm here tonight because the master plan that's before you not only precludes people from coming onto the estuary, but it does not include trails into the estuary. If you look at section 4.02 of the conservation easement, it talks about improvements that are allowed within the resource protection area, which is the lower area, the estuary we're talking about, and it includes trails, provided that if they cross wet areas, they are constructed on boardwalk or similar appropriate construction. Further goes on to subject to review footbridges, stream crossing structures, and stream access structures. I think it's very clear that when they drafted the conservation easement, they contemplated that there would be trails in the estuary and access to the estuary. Item 5 of the staff recommendations kind of alludes to the need for trails to allow access into the estuary. Today I have offered to the Grayland Trust to secure the funding, design and construct a trail in the estuary if it starts at the base of the winter access trail as a condition of the master plan approval. So what I'm asking is that the master plan approval contain a condition that requires the addition of trails in the estuary and access to the estuary. And a minimum, the conditions need to clearly recognize that access onto the estuary in the future is required. There's a small, in the overall population of Anchorage anyway, there's a small but well-intentioned and well-organized group who are very well represented here tonight that are adamantly opposed to people accessing the estuary. I hope that the planning and zoning will make changes that represent the interests of the larger population of Anchorage. If you will look at the area that's designated, I don't know, I guess which goes all the way around here as the resource protection area, there's more than adequate area to accommodate the needs of both those that want to keep people out and the people that are concerned about the cranes and other animals. And the cranes are apparently only nest in a freshwater estuary, and the freshwater estuary is clear over down here where
there is 1 minute and 22 seconds left. Oh, you're over. Oh, you didn't, all right. Okay. All right, just 1 second. But we have several people in the queue, several commissioners. Did you not? Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Bob, but we do have some people in the queue, so please remain at the podium. Ms. Steen.
Through the chair, I'd like to hear Mr. Baugh continue and finish his testimony, and then I do have a couple of questions for him when he's complete.
All right. Thank you very much.
the only thing that was unsaid is the cranes apparently nest in freshwater estuary, and the only freshwater estuary is down adjacent to this viewing stand that was added specifically so that people could have better views of the nesting cranes.
All right.
That's all I had. And I want to give you something. Do I do that now or when I leave?
You can bring whatever you have forward and give it to the secretary. Thank you. Ms. Dean, you have some questions.
Yes, my first question is, as a board member, you've seen how the arrangement was for the finances to purchase this property. And I know the funding came from donations from the general public. There were some corporate donations, and there was a fair amount of grant money that did come from a variety of other groups, such as the federal government. There was also some money that comes from the Corps of Engineers to the group in general. I was curious if you could give us maybe a percentage breakdown of where all those funds came from to purchase the property.
I'm afraid I have to tell you that most of that happened before I went on the board.
Okay, thank you. No problem.
Phil can certainly answer it, though.
My next question then is, could you give me a little more information on your condition that you were talking about adding about the addition for trails and access to the estuary? Could you give me a little more information on that? I didn't totally follow what you were referring to.
Right now, the plan has a fence along the entire top of the bluff, and that fence is intended to prevent access onto the estuary. There is, at this time, a long or a well-established easy trail down onto the estuary that would be just too logical to use as access down there. It's in the location on, I can't quite read it, but I think that on some of the drawings it talks about a winter trail. That is actually the trail that years ago somebody took a cat down there and cut a road, but now it's grown up.
Thank you.
Commissioner Robinson?
Thank you. I think you just answered this, but the plan actually highlights the potential. You quoted the section of the conservation easement that talks about even the allowed uses within that most protective zone, and it contemplates trails and whatnot. And the plan actually has a table where it also says subject to review. It sort of re-summarizes that conservation easement and also spells out that trails, porous or boardwalk in wet areas would be subject to review in resource protection areas. But your testimony is that this plan precludes any of those trails at any point in the future. Is that right?
It does.
And where specifically does it do that? And if you can't come up with it, we'll ask staff when they're back up, or I certainly will. But because it seems to imply that you can do it, but and I want to separate this testimony from the issue of the coastal trail and versus one of relative access into that area. But you're of the opinion that it specifically says there will be no trails in that area.
It does not say that, but it has a fence. If you look along the top of the bluff, there's a fence around the entire top of the bluff, and that fence was there specifically to keep people off of the estuary. And just to make clear, I'm not saying that the master plan precludes it in the future. All I'm asking is that the master plan have a statement that it is allowed or is contemplated in the future, because if it doesn't, then it's never going to happen, because someone who comes back later on and wants to put a trailer in, all you're here as well, it's not in the master plan. They can't add it.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions from Mr. Ball? All right, seeing and hearing none. Thank you for your testimony. The petitioner's representative has 5 remaining minutes. Oh, I'm sorry. There are more. My apologies.
No apologies needed. My name is Mike Carlson. I'm an architect by trade. I'm a member of the Sand Lake Community Council, although I'm not here officially representing them tonight. And I'm a fan of the Anchorage Coastal Wildlife Refuge. I'm here to support the master plan as it's written. I think in this master plan, Great Land Trust, USKH, the Parks Department, and the stakeholders have created a masterful reading of this unique environment, this unique landscape. The plan they've developed really fits the character of the area, it draws out the character of the area, and it creates a different face to the Anchorage Coastal Wildlife Refuge, a real different experience from Potter Marsh, which is a very kind of active, busy area, open area. This is a much more contemplative, personal experience. And having this contrast between Potter's Marsh and this very personal experience at the Coastal Wildlife Refuge, or the Campbell Creek Estuary, I think is really an important distinction to make, and is really, in my mind, the genius of this whole master plan that they've developed. What I wanted to do was to tell you that I do support the master plan, and although I think the master plan could very well be, I'd be delighted if you'd approve it just the way it is right now.
With some of the staff comments I think are acceptable. FAR outlined the changes that I think could be made to the master plan. I might be a little bit stronger in some cases. I would suggest that the master plan has great language about access and that we don't need comment number 1. On comment number 2, the coastal trail access, a link makes sense to me from a coastal trail which is outside of the refuge, but a coastal trail, a wide paved transportation trail that comes through and into the refuge, or the estuary protected area, or the estuary plan, I think is totally inappropriate. And I think part of the genius of this character is maintaining this rural nature and having a parking lot which is not paved and which is small and very compact. I think is completely in character with the master plan. I think that's where we should start and only go to a larger parking lot and paving if there becomes some issues in the future. I did tell Ms. Carlson that, remind you that on the back of her testimony, she's actually written specific language that FAR recommends for changing the staff recommendations, conditions of approval for you. So you can look at that for your reference.
Thank you very much.
So thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much for your testimony. Will the next person please come forward? Is there anyone else who wishes to testify? Please come forward.
Lady Chairman, members of the Commission, my name is Boyd Morgenthaler. That's 12 letters, Morgenthaler. I live in South Anchorage, about 2 or 3 miles east of the estuary on Shore Drive. I'm a member of the Bayshore Clat Community Council and also a member of FAR, and I'm in support of the plan as it was presented to and approved by the Parks and Rec Commission. There's been a lot of conversation about trails, and I think we need to talk about that a little bit more because not all trails are the same. In 2006, after 10 years of heated debate, the state of Alaska rejected any kind of South Coastal Trail through the Anchorage Coastal Wildlife Refuge. That being said, I think we can presume that any kind of trail that happens in the future will not go through the Coastal Wildlife Refuge. Now the property is surrounded on the north by R1 housing, private property, and the only public access is through the Coastal Wildlife Refuge. So it makes no sense to have any kind of coastal trail access to a place where a coastal trail will not be. The purpose of the master plan here is not at all compatible with that, as has been testified many times before. But I think you need to keep things in perspective. A coastal trail, or like the Tony Knolls Coastal Trail, a recreational trail, is a cleared path that's 27 feet wide, and the center of it is paved with asphalt as wide as a one-lane street. So for all of this that we've been talking about, how do we imagine that we're going to allow that kind of a trail access through this natural area? It just absolutely makes no sense. So I would propose that you consider adding language under the character of this plan on page 13 of the plan. It essentially read, maintenance of undisturbed habitat for the proliferation of plants and animals dictates that access and public use of the site must be carefully muted. Consequently, site development necessarily excludes alignment, access, easement, or direct connection to the Tony Knolls Coastal Trail or any similar current or future recreational trail or project that would increase public pressure on the natural area. to save a little bit of time, I have this written, and I will have a letter that you can have.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here who wishes to, how many people are there yet to testify? Could you raise your hand so I can see clearly? All right. So one other person in addition to you. We have a need for a break, but we'll hear the last testimony. All right. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. My name is Rick Sennett. I'm a retired wildlife biologist. I used to manage the wildlife refuge. I am very familiar with this area, and I've reviewed the master plan, and I fully support the master plan as written. I think the stakeholders group and Great Land Trust did a remarkable job on that. I've submitted written comments, but I'd like to just reiterate briefly that I do have a major concern with the proposal or recommendation to accommodate access for the coastal trail in this. And the reason is because my reading of the conservation easement suggests that it doesn't really fit the coastal trail as it currently exists. A wide trail, paved trail, multi-use trail. It would totally change the character of this area. So I would urge you not to amend the master plan to accommodate that. Thank you.
All right. Are there any questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Sennett, for your testimony. Will the last person please come forward?
Madam Chair, before I testify, I wonder if I could offer my congratulations to my former colleague, Mr. Phelps.
Certainly. We won't count that in your time.
I'm going to embarrass you a little bit because you and I both used to have a hell of a lot more hair than we do today. 30-some years ago, this man and I we co-authored the original Anchorage Wetlands Plan. And in all candor, a lot of the development that has occurred in Anchorage today, the plan of that development would not have occurred without that man. So I just wanted to say congratulations. And boy, we fought some battles. In any event, my name is Wayne Pichon. I'm a 36-year resident of Anchorage. I'm the secretary for the Bayshore Clat Community Council, and I was honored to be a member of the stakeholder group that forged the master plan before you here tonight. My family and I are not strangers to the property in question. Ethel Kaiser was a friend of ours, and candidly, my girls grew up playing on that property. In my former career as a biologist, I co-authored what has become the definitive work on the vegetation in the marsh immediately adjacent to that property. Allow me to suggest to you that something almost magical happened in the preparation of this master plan. Previously warring fractions were brought together to achieve consensus. Those for and against various issues, including the coastal trail and marsh access, sat together and forged a compromise that involved all citizens. Lots of us gave up an awful lot of hours of our time to sit and get this done. You know, while we didn't sit around a campfire holding hands or anything, we nonetheless felt we had completed a monumental task without involving courts or litigation to translate what all believed was in the common good. Tonight I come before you, though, as a very irritated citizen, stakeholder, and community officer, as I witnessed two municipal employees in almost sniper fashion attempt to hold hostage the stakeholder process. In a well-timed letter after completion of the stakeholder process, they insist that a master plan not progress unless their wishes regarding coastal access and right-of-way for a non-sponsored, non-permitted, non-funded, and non-existing coastal trail be included. Their letter's long on words, but short on facts. Maybe somebody didn't get the memo, or maybe they didn't open their email. The south extension of the coastal trail does not have a sponsor. The Corps of Engineers has pulled the federal permit. The environmental impact statement is stale. There is no funding available for the project, and I don't believe any of us in this room tonight will find one proponent of this project in the current administration. I don't get it. Such sophomoric political meddling should be dismissed in its entirety. I urge this body to act on the master plan as presented to you by the very citizens who were charged with the task, and ignore the narcissistic interference of staff members. I don't know. Maybe you might want to give the errant employees some alternative career counseling.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I don't see anyone in the queue, but having had such experience with wetlands, I want to remind you that we do have a wetlands plan before us, and the public testimony, the public hearing is still open. Thank you.
Is this a revision of what we did 30 years ago?
I believe that might be the case.
Good luck.
So we'd like to see you again. Thank you very much for your testimony. All right. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify? Anyone else at all? All right. The petitioner's representatives has 5 minutes for rebuttal.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. I probably won't need that. But I think you've gotten a taste of the controversy that surrounds that one issue had we delved into that. And this certainly was a taste, but the appetizer main course would have been a seriously long evening and a few meetings, very much so probably. To address that issue, what we're suggesting is that we can live with staff language. The reality is that this is a master plan, and right now it doesn't include that element. The South Coast Trail is not in this. A master plan such as this is being approved by this body. For anything outside of this to take place, it's going to require, again, master plan amendment through this body. This is the authority on that master plan. Therein lies the authority. It will come before this body. Thereby it will demand a public process. And I think the master plan can simply say amendment to include such things as a South Coastal Trail requires a public process before the Planning and Zoning Commission. With respect to the question that was brought by Mr. Ball with respect to access and whether it's discouraged, prohibited, there is indeed a fence, and if you look at this drawing, you'll see that there is a fence proposed, a rustic fence it's called, basically surrounding the south and west sides of the meadows. So it is discouraged. There's no doubt about that. It does allow a trail down that west side to an overlook that would be at the bottom of the bluff. It doesn't say that access is prohibited, but certainly all the language in the plan and the physical presence of the plan as you read it does discourage access. I guess with respect to the process, there's no doubt that this was driven by a strong stakeholder group, and certainly a majority felt very one-sided, but that's the nature of public process. Is it reflective of the public opinion? Well, you saw how that lay. It did lay to the less developed side of that matrix. So there's no doubt that the stakeholder to a great degree did reflect perhaps the majority of sentiment as expressed by the public. But on the other hand, does it accommodate those who disagree? To some degree, yes, but not fully. And so certainly not everyone is happy on either side of this. Perhaps some would like stronger language, some would like certainly a lot more development. The reality, though, is that what we're trying to do with this master plan, and I think that it does this in words that I heard as elegant and very complimentary, is that it does protect the resource, it does protect the neighborhood, it allows expansion of parking if necessary to accommodate future growth. We hope that that's not necessary. With respect to issues such as whether that lot is paved or not, to a great degree that's going to have to be driven by our discussions with the Department of Public Works and what their watershed people and their runoff people feel is appropriate with respect to that development. There are indeed ways of accommodating through porous pavement or perhaps a wrap or some other method that reduces siltation, because indeed it's a legitimate concern and needs to be dealt with. I think that it's probably effective to deal with it at a staff level and see if we can resolve that. So with that, we think we do offer a plan that tries to divine some wisdom out of the public process and distill that into a plan that protects those assets that we have and at the same time provides for public enjoyment of a valuable public asset. There were questions with respect to funding. We can certainly have Phil Shepard of Great Land Trust answer that. But if there are that or any other questions, I leave that up to the body, and thank you for your help and participation.
Thank you very much. I don't see any questions in the queue, so thank you for your testimony and your rebuttal.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. The commission will take a 7-minute break, and we'll be back. And the public hearing is now closed. Thank you. All right. The December 10th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting is now in session again. Before us is case 2012-141, MOA Parks and Recreation, the master plan review of a public parks master plan. The public testimony is over. The public hearing is closed. What is the wish of the commission? Commissioner Phelps.
Madam Chairman, I would move for the approval of the master plan as submitted to us, not including the staff recommendations.
Thank you. May I have a second? Seconded by Commissioner Ferguson. Would you like to speak to your motion, Commissioner Phelps?
Yes, I think that we've heard a lot of testimony that describes the uniqueness of this area. It is really very unique. And one gentleman is described as being an estuarine area. It's a very special estuarine area. And you really don't want to have a lot of development in that area because of the fragility of the wetlands and the estuarine areas. I really don't see any advantage whatsoever of trying to make this any more difficult than it has to be through the inclusion of language that might lead to considerations of the coastal trail. It does not make any sense to me. So I think that the best solution is to adopt the plan as recommended. It's gone through a stakeholder process. It properly manages that area, and it seems like there's a general consensus that exists. And so for those reasons, I will support. I would recommend this approval.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Mulcahy.
Just clarification, Commissioner Phelps, was your motion to approve the plan as presented or the plan with the staff recommendations?
Plan as presented.
Thank you. I will be supporting that motion. It's pretty clear to me, reading the documents, but as summarized in the Parks and Rec on page 47, where when this land was purchased by the Great Land Trust, this was the intent, that this be preserved as a natural use area with limited access, so people can still use it, but not to develop it into a park, to maintain it in as natural a setting as reasonable. So I will support this. I think that the master plan totally supports that as written, and it does provide some flexibility as we move forward to accommodate use fitting with that natural use area.
Thank you. Commissioner Dean.
Madam Chair, I will not be supporting this motion. I am frustrated with the lack of general access by the public to this property. I also am frustrated with a fence and the lack of use of bicycles through most of the year. 2 months of the year for bicycles is not fair. I do think that this is sensitive, but as is a lot of the Bluff property and the other estuaries that exist already on the Bluff. We've done a fine job managing those areas. I don't see why this one has to be so special. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Robinson.
Thank you. I will be supporting the motion. I think we've heard testimony tonight that obviously there are some strong feelings and opinions, but I think the overwhelming feeling that and sense that I get from this process is it's a really great asset and a big win for the municipality to have this facility. It's a great example of public-private partnerships and, frankly, a way for the municipality to essentially get a tremendous place for the public to go and visit at very little cost. I think that the plan starts small, and I think that the plan also allows for incremental change to happen as it's needed and with the mitigating measures that it sort of proposes in the various tables. So with that, I will be supporting the motion. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Ferguson.
I will be supporting the motion also. I share Commissioner Dean's concern about the lack of winter access. I think overall it is a good plan. And I think it should go forward as drawn without the staff's recommendations. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I too will be supporting the motions for all the motion for all the reasons previously stated, but we should use our voting machines. So a vote yes supports the motion for the master plan as presented without staff recommendations. Please use your machine. That motion carries. Thank you very much. We are now moving on to case 2012-140, the MOA Community Development Department Planning Division and Ordinance amending Title 21 for wind energy conversion systems. May we have a presentation by staff?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In August 2010, the Assembly approved an ordinance which allowed wind energy conservation systems or wind turbines in certain districts as an accessory use by either administrative site plan or conditional use. And the ordinance required that the applicant obtain written consent from the simple majority of property owners, of residentially zoned property owners, and that such consent be submitted with the application. This was a provision that was added on the floor at the Assembly hearing. It was not proposed by staff. And as discussed in the memo from the municipal attorney in the staff report, this provision is very problematic because it denies a property owner due process and essentially delegates the land use decision-making to a vote by a person's property owners. And these people can choose to withhold their consent for any reason. It doesn't have to have anything to do with the land use impacts. And that is why we have public hearings and require that a board such as yourself review the public testimony and hold that against the standard to determine whether or not the proposal has an impact. So this proposal removes that requirement, and there were a few other provisions that needed to be cleaned up. We had no time period that we were required to review things for. There was also no appeal process. And it also referred to a noise standard, a DBH noise standard, which actually doesn't mean anything. I think it's DBA, and so just to clarify, we just referred to the existing noise requirements. The reason why we went forward with this outside of the overall Title 21 rewrite was given the significant legal repercussions of this.
Are there any questions? Commissioner Mulcahy.
I'm sorry. I'm not sure I caught that part about the operational noise. Right now, in the text, so you've deleted the whole reference to the DB, H, or A. Is that? We're just referring them to 15.70.80?
Through the chair, yes. On page 4, what we proposed is it referred to 50 dBH, which at a minimum that would need to be dBA.
Right, that was
but instead of that, we actually proposed that it be according to the noise ordinance in 1570.
Thank you.
Commissioner Robinson.
I had two questions. One, do you have any pending applications for these systems?
Through the chair, Commissioner Robinson, I don't have any pending at this time. What I can tell you is that we have had a few applications in the past few years. Several people have gotten very frustrated when I tried to explain to them how to comply with this. We have had one person in particular who has not been able to proceed with his plans because of this provision. He tried to get a variance as well and was unsuccessful at that. And I specifically know of a school as well who ended up not proceeding with their application because of this requirement.
I guess my other question is, in full disclosure, I was involved in drafting the ordinance to begin with, and I think that just that clause was added, somewhere along the line, I think at assembly adoption or something like that, and I think it wasn't a part of the original ordinance. And I just was curious, so did the review come about because of this one experience of this individual, or is there some sort of legal review that's trailing 2 years after we pass ordinances?
Through the chair, Commissioner Robinson, it was part due to this one person, but it was not just this one person, because trying to figure out how to administer this. So it just says that the applicant shall provide this proof, and with each application, it's not a public notice process that we normally administer, and how do I make sure that an applicant has notified their neighbors, and how do I know what they put in that notification? Just so with each application, it was sort of a difficult process to figure out exactly how you administer an applicant taking their own responsibility to notify and then communicate to me the result of that notification. So it was a combination of all of my experience administering this ordinance.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Ferguson.
I would hope that assuming we pass this tonight, do we have the ability to notify those people that started down the process and failed earlier that there is a new process in place?
Through the chair, if this was to be passed by you and then ultimately by the Assembly, I would go back to my records and notify those individuals.
I would think that'd be appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is a public hearing on case 2012-140. Is there anyone here who wishes to testify? Would you please come forward?
Good evening. And how are you, Madam Yoshimura? My name is Bobby Little. And the problems that I have with this proposal is that, like most things, until it really touches our toes, our feet, we want to get involved. And what happened is that section where it requires me to contact members in my community, that's where the problem comes at. Because like it says here, a personal experience I had with neighbors from the day that I moved in there back in 76 up until 2010, finally got the authorities involved. It led to a whole lot of confrontation. But the bottom line is, you can go and ask your neighbors to support you on something like this, and for whatever their reasons may not be to what you want. They may not even like what I'm proposing. They might not want the color of my house the color it is, and that's the type of stuff that's in this here proposal. And from the way it states that if no one, even if we did have something to say, they still going to do what they want to do in spite of what the public testimony may be. That's how I'm picking it up. Now, I could be wrong. And the other reason I recall back some time ago when we were having to deal with radio antennas for amateur radio, and we had a big issue like that. And finally it got resolved in a very, humane manner. But this is really, and this is something that I've been waiting for a long time, to be able to supplement my energy as opposed to what I have to go to MLMP or Instar, whoever. And this is really a big issue. And I mean, we're trying to go green, as we say, but it seems as if the planning, this Title 21, is really going to put a cog in all of the stuff that may be coming down the pike, coming this physical year that's coming. And so we really need to think in terms of, really, are we going to afford property owners to actually have the right to manage their own property? in lieu of what may be structured by the planning committee as to what we can and cannot do. Now, I can understand if it's interfering with, public safety, I understand that. But when you have to rely on your neighbor to make a decision on how you're going to utilize your property, I think that's far-reaching. And I really, would like to see the planning board to reconsider and look into. I see a lot of case law in here, which I did read through, supporting either side, really, those who are for it and those who are against it. But being that this proposal...
Your time is up, so Could you please conclude? Thank you.
All right, and thank you all.
Thank you very much. Were there any questions? Seeing and hearing none. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify? Anyone else at all? Seeing and hearing no one, the public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the commission? Commissioner Robinson.
In the case 2012-140, an ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Section 2145-410, to provide for a more efficient administrative site plan review of applications for small wind energy conversion systems, I move to approve our recommendation to the Assembly to amend this portion of code to eliminate the section having to do with neighbor review, specifying a 45-day review process, providing an appeal, and clarifying the noise standard.
Thank you very much. That motion has been seconded by Commissioner Mulcahy. Commissioner Mulcahy, you're in the queue.
I guess there's a question for procedure and possibly for motion. Are we recommending approval of the ordinance and the Assembly memorandum, or is it just the ordinance? What's necessary? Do we need both the ordinance and the Assembly, or does the Assembly handle that?
Ms. Iverson, can you respond to that?
I believe it's only necessary that you approve the ordinance.
Ordinance language? Okay.
And is that your understanding, Commissioner Robinson, and your second, Commissioner Mulcahy?
It is.
All right. Thank you very much.
That's all I needed to clarify. I support it, obviously.
All right. Thank you very much. Is there any discussion? Is there any objection to the motion? Seeing and hearing none, that motion is approved. Thank you very much. All right. We have no appearance requests. Are there any reports? Madam Secretary, do you have a report? Okay.
Carol Wong asked me to check with you on two items. One is on January 14th. We have a meeting scheduled, but at this time there's no cases scheduled. They're asking whether or not you would consider a work session with AS on the 6-year Anchorage School District CIP.
What is the schedule for that recommendation?
I'm sorry, I don't have that. Erica? I'm sorry, Ms. McConnell? Do you by any chance know what the schedule is on the Anchorage School District 6-year CIP? We can get...
If that is the only item on the January 14th agenda, I would prefer that we not have a meeting and that we work really hard on February 4th and February 11th.
Okay.
I think we have consensus on that matter. All right.
And I have
Since we didn't have a unanimous vote on anything tonight, except for the windmill thing, or the wind farm thing. All right.
And there's a second request. And that's in February, whether or not you would consider moving the director's monthly meeting from the 21st to the 20th. I'm sorry, I don't know the reason for that, but they asked whether we can move it to Wednesday.
I think that's fine with everyone. You can't make Wednesday. Okay, so there are two people. You're out either way. What about you, Peter? Could you meet any other day?
18.
If that's a holiday. You're such a little troublemaker.
Okay,
The 19th, the 19th, or the 22nd?
February 20th.
Yeah, that's true, it does, yes.
February 20th instead of 21st of February.
One of the things it says is, it says East Anchorage Plan Consultants. Are we getting a work session presentation? Is that what we're getting?
You're right. That must be, it must be to accommodate, what I heard, and Madam Chair, when you weren't at the luncheon, what they basically have, and I've been, with my other hats, been sitting on this East Anchorage thing, and I think that they've heard from the commission wanting to brief us, get our feelings before they actually put pen to paper and draft a plan. And so my guess is that they're able to come up on the 20th and not the 21st. So I don't, unless we know that they've got other availability, I know that the main consultants are out of state. So.
All right, okay, well, that's it then. I think it's... Is there a time on the 20th that you might be available as opposed to noon? 2? Let's see if we can... Dana?
I work for a living.
Yes, I know, yes.
I have to check with my employer.
You'll have to check with your employer. Okay. Oh, my goodness gracious. Okay. What road is that, Dana?
What's that?
What road is that?
Eagle River.
Eagle River Road?
Road.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Okay, all right. Let's if you can get back to us at 2 p.m. on
Wednesday?
Yep. And save the planning department lunch money.
Is there any chance to do it a little bit later, so like at 3, so that when we get done, we don't have to go back to the office? Or something, like towards the end of the day?
Your employer won't.
I mean, like 3 o'clock. Is that all right? Yeah, like 3 o'clock.
At 3, you can leave the office at 3 o'clock and not go
I got
back?
permission to leave at 3.
Okay. All right. Okay, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. Somebody. Bruce. Your last act. Your last day. Miss Dean. Yeah, right, because it's so entertaining. Miss Dean. Okay, and a second for Bruce Faust. This meeting is adjourned.